This podcast is a HyAct production. Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us on our second Hydrogen Integration for Accelerated Energy Transitions podcast. In this episode, we introduce HyRES, a hub for research challenges in hydrogen and alternative liquid fuels, a project very closely aligned with HyAct. We'll also discuss how HyRES and HyAct will benefit each other by highlighting both areas of commonality and where these projects differ to deliver maximum impact. But before we get started, I'll ask our two speakers to introduce themselves, followed by the HyAct podcast production team.
Hello, I'm Jianzhong Wu. I'm a professor of multi-vector energy systems and head of School of Engineering at Cardiff University.
And I'm Rachael Rothman. I'm a professor of sustainable chemical engineering at the University of Sheffield.
I'm Dan Massey. I'm a research project administrator on the HyAct and SuperGen projects here at Newcastle University.
And I'm Rhiannon Lamb, project administrator also from Newcastle University, working on the HyAct Hub.
And I'm Dr. Jamie Blanche of the University of Glasgow. I'm a PDRA and I've been working on the consultation phase with stakeholders for HyAct.
In our previous episode, we introduced HyAct with a discussion on how HyAct will benefit communities. But I'll ask you first, Jianzhong, if you could give a recap, what is HyAct?
Sure. HyAct is for National Center of Hydrogen Integration for Accelerated Energy Transitions. So it's a 5-year project, will be funded by APSEC, and we consist of 9 universities. So our vision is to ensure that hydrogen is properly integrated in future equitable energy systems through holistic multidisciplinary research which address integration challenges. So where, for example, the key questions we're looking at is where we could use hydrogen, when to use it, where will be the hydrogen come from, what is the infrastructure need, what is the cost, what is the policy support and the market arrangement needed, what is social perspectives and societal impact, things like that. So these are the key system integration challenges we would like to investigate in HyAct.
Thank you. And Rachael, if you could give us an overview, what is HyRES?
Sure. So HyRES focuses on the fundamental research challenges, and in that way it dovetails nicely with HyAct. So we look at the kind of technical details, how do you get the technology to work, and then HyAct looks at how do you put that in the big picture of the whole energy system in the UK. So HyRES is about identifying, prioritizing and finding solutions to fundamental research challenges that may be engineering or science based, but we look at them in the prospect of the whole system. So we're considering technical challenges that might be about hydrogen production or hydrogen storage or use or distribution. But we also then look at those technical challenges through the lenses of the economics, the environment, the social and the safety, to make sure that the research we're doing is answering, as well as interesting questions that will ultimately be useful and can be deployed in a helping industry. So we've spent a long time working with project partners to help to prioritise where the key research challenges are, looking at how can those challenges most benefit the UK. And we've identified some initial projects, but there'll be more and more projects added as time goes on. We've got 7 partner universities within HyRES at the minute, but as we add other projects, that should increase. So it's led by the University of Bath, and then University of Sheffield and University of Warwick were the original 2 extra ones, and we've now supplemented that with 4 more universities. And it's Tim Mays at the University of Bath who's the PI who leads it. And yes, we've added UCL, University of Portsmouth, University of Surrey, and University of St Andrews.
Thank you. So, what's been done so far, and why is HyRES important?
So what we've spent the last year doing is really bringing the community together. So we've had lots of events online, and at the minute we're doing in-person roadshows where we move around the country, and we're bringing together academics, industry, policymakers to identify what are the big challenges in hydrogen. So what's stopping us from deploying hydrogen on a large scale at the moment? And we've used a process called theory of change to help us identify where are we trying to get to? What are the barriers to stop us getting there? What does that mean the challenges are? And then what projects can we do to help overcome them? So that's what we've been doing so far. And we've come up with a list of priorities and some initial projects, and our plans going forward are to start enacting those projects and obviously doing the research, but also to keep the community building and making sure we're interacting well. I think historically lots of research in this space has sat in silos, and what's going to be hugely important is if we're going to have impact is that we all start working together in a way that's maybe not traditional for academics. So we've been doing lots of work on that community building, and that will continue throughout the lifetime of the hub.
Thank you. With HyACT's main mission being to address the integration barriers for a hydrogen economy, how will HyACT and HyRES benefit from each other, and how might these collaborations look?
So I think one thing that's really important is there's no point in identifying a technology breakthrough if it doesn't fit in the UK-wide supply chain. And equally, there's no point in designing a UK-wide supply chain if you don't have the technology for it. So HyACT and HyRES, it's hugely important, and we are, that we work together in order to put both the technology and the system into the same conversation. And so I think one of the big benefits is that from a research perspective, we need each other. We need to look at the big picture, and the HyACT need to look at the kind of technology and where the technology is coming from, the data that's available, etc. But not just within the research base, also within the communities. When you start to think about the whole UK energy system, and then you could look at a technical challenge about an electrode and an electrolyzer, the communities that work on those at the minute are quite disparate from each other. And between the two hubs, we have the benefit of bringing all of those communities together in order to work on the problem.
Yeah, and from the HyRES point of view, so we are working closely with HyRES already. So together we engaged with over 140 different organizations. And for HyACT, we had more than 40 one-to-one meetings. We organized several workshops, set up online these focus groups, and we received more than 150 responses to our citizen and stakeholder surveys. So far we carried out state-of-the-art analysis and horizon scanning, identified key research challenges, set up the research consortium, and develop a research program, and started to disseminate what we learned to deliver, to deliver impact. So we are ready to move on to the next stage. So we have embedded a lot of interactions and collaborations between the two hubs in our proposals. So we are proposing have a joint events. We will share of stakeholder need analysis, and we plan for this joint call for future projects. So I think we also plan to jointly liaise with other hydrogen investments and present both hubs at events and conferences and deliver impact together.
So with such overlap and commonality or common ground between HyACT and HyRES, what would be the key differences between HyACT and HyRES?
So I think the easiest difference to explain is that HyRES looks at the details of the technologies, and HyACT looks at how they fit in the system of the whole country. And the overlap there is the more local scale integration, which might be about how does a small production technology fit with a use technology, which isn't a UK scale integration, it's a smaller scale integration, and both projects kind of overlap in that local integration space.
Yeah, I just add something, and because for HyACT, as Rachael said, so we are focusing on the system integration. And this whole system analysis is very important, which will inform the design of the components. But for analysis, we do need to get help from HyRES as well to get the detailed information. So this is clearly the benefit there. We can work together. And in HyACT, we're trying to develop this technology roadmap, and so that we can inform the industrial development, but also this overarching roadmap to inform the policy making. So definitely this is a place we can work together, although it's a difference, but it's really opportunities for us to work together.
Thank you. Now, Dan, you had a question on early career researchers.
Yes, so I was wondering how will early career researchers be able to contribute to both projects, and what ways is that facilitated from within both projects?
Both hubs have early careers positions within both of them, so there's a whole host of postdoc and PhD studentships that are associated with directly with the hubs. But of course, there's people across the whole country who work in this space and are early career researchers. So I think there's two angles to this. One is, how do we support those that are directly involved in the two hubs, and also how do we support those ECRs that are spread out across the whole country? And one thing that we've proposed in our hub bids is that we'll have a joint early career researcher forum. Because one thing that's really important in this space, and if we're to make a difference in the sustainability space as a whole, is that we can speak a common language, and we have understanding of what different people in the whole chain that's needed are doing, and be able to talk to each other. And you can only start to speak a common language if you bring people together. So the plan of having this joint early career researcher forum is so that postdocs and PhD students who are involved in HyRES can talk to those who are involved in a HyAct on a regular basis in a semi-coordinated way, such that we can start to have those conversations and understand where each individual's work fits in with the whole system. Now, of course, that's talking directly about those early career researchers that are directly connected to the hubs. Aside from that, we'll be holding a whole series of events, both hubs separately and some together. So we've already committed that we'll hold annual events together where we bring the whole hydrogen community into one space that's relevant both to the HyAct and the HyRES. Because as Jianzhong said, you can't separate these two things. It's hugely important they're together. And so there'll be earlier career researcher bursaries to be able to attend the in-person events to help support them. I think it's always one of the challenges as an early career researcher is you don't have your own funding, so it can often be harder to attend things. So we've written in bursaries for attending events, and that's something HyRES has been doing with the roadshow so far, and we'll continue to do. And we'll help support those networks to make sure that everyone across the country can be involved, and also that we can match make different people together to start to develop new bids. Because whilst we have these two hubs, there's only a limited pot of money and availability and resources that they can provide, and we need to do way more than the amount that the two hubs have currently. And so one thing that's important for both hubs, and this is applicable to ECRs and other academics and industrialists, is to help support, matchmake people together to be able to put together projects and help support them to get additional funding which comes from outside of the hubs in order to drive the whole space forward.
Yeah, Rachael gave a very good summary about the joint activities already, but I just want to add, because ECR is so important, not only because they're at the early career stage, so need more help, but actually that is the future leaders in this area. This area is so complicated and very dynamic, developing very fast. We do need future leaders. So actually for these two hubs, we're targeting at growing the future leaders in this area as well. So we need to supporting from the starting point. So what we have done in HyAct, we appointed an ECR champion. It's Professor Eva Foley, and who's take a leading role on that, coordinate all activities, develop further detailed collaboration with HyRES and with other big centers as well. And also we will create, we call it Young Researcher Group. So that will basically comprise of PhDs, the PDRAs, and basically we will set something to shadow the HyAct management team, so that give them the opportunity to practice the leadership type of opportunities. And so we will try to give them well-defined responsibilities and decision-making power, and with the support from the ECR champion. So this group will organize a number of researcher-led activities and events, something like the site visits, secondments, technical workshops, grant and journal writing, for example, trying to make sure we get maximum opportunities for them through these two hubs.
Can I fire one more question off?
Oh, please do.
Yeah. Okay. So a shift to impact has been present within both hubs. I'd be interested to know how that has changed your guys' working, and how have you, or the planned work, I guess, and how have you guys found that shift towards a more impact-based approach?
So it's interesting because we're looking at an impact-based approach, but we're also focusing on low TRL fundamental research, and quite often those, in the past at least, have been seen as almost polar opposites. So if you're looking at low TRL, you don't worry about the impact and you wait till you're at higher TRL. And actually, that's one of the barriers that's been getting in the way of driving this and many other areas forward. And one of the ways that we're really focusing on impact in HyRES is by co-developing all the projects with industry and other partners who it's relevant for. So just because you're in industry and you maybe have a technology that's even working in higher up the TRL levels, it doesn't mean you're not having fundamental research questions. And I think this is one of the challenges of the way technology readiness levels are often perceived, is it's a linear scale, and actually it's never really linear. You might get to TRL 7, find you've got a fundamental problem, and part of what you're doing is now down at TRL 1 and 2 again, but you're still looking at some of the rest of it from the point of view of TRL 7. And so there's huge opportunity there to make sure we can deliver impact by understanding what are the genuine barriers to deployment from a research perspective. And this is where the workshops we've run so far and the theory of change has really helped, in that we've sat down with our industrial partners to say, well, what is the barrier? What's getting in the way? And some of those are not research challenges that HyRES can focus on. Some of them may be policy or regulation. And obviously, as both hubs, we can provide evidence that can help inform that policy and regulation. But our focus within HyRES from a research perspective is more about how we overcome those technical challenges and make sure we put them in the space where the technical challenge that's developed makes sense from an economic and an environmental and a social and is safe as well. So we're looking at those perspectives. So I think the drive to impact is about co-development and about early cooperation with partners. And one thing you'll see from the projects we have so far is that they all involve project partners to one extent or a greater extent in some cases, because they're really driven by that need.
And from the HyRES point of view, what we found is, because we are looking at system challenge, so we do need to engage with different parties, listen to their voice, and we are taking the similar approach. So we co-develop the key research program with industry, with policymakers. So for example, through industry engagement, we learned a lot of new perspectives. For example, we do need to look at the risk in a cost realistic way. I mean, for example, the business models, how to make sure we can bring in investment. And also industry very interested to look at this aggregated transport hub, because sometimes we have an industry cluster, then we can develop hydrogen center around that and to decarbonize heat and transport as well. So ideas like that, we try to embed this in our proposal. And also from the industry engagement, we learned there's a lot of replication, but the scalability challenge is there. So this is why we designed the program, try to address that. And also from the community engagement, we realized actually community will be a key to reach the consensus. And the current is a lack of data, lack of consensus, and also, for example, the environmental protection agencies basically to be involved more, so that we can make sure we have this, keep this integrity of the project. There are a lot of funding, so we try to embed this into our program, so that in our solutions provided, technologies provided, nobody will be locked out, nobody will be locked in. So the evidence we collected will really useful to inform the policy making and the industry development in the UK. So that is from the starting point. With the delivery of the project, we have this mechanism there. Both hubs will working closely with the policymakers, industry sectors, to make sure what we learned, what the evidence we collected from the projects can pass to the industry, to the policy making directly.
That's excellent. Thank you. I think we possibly answered the question that was coming next then. I mean, I was going to say that given that we're training future leaders and we're looking at early cooperations, how will the hubs work together to maximize policy impact? Although I think we may have just touched upon that.
Yes. It anyway, because I can add a little bit more on it. One of the key things for maximizing policy impact is to have the evidence in the first place, but then you have to get that evidence to the right people. And the two hubs have a common co-I. Paul Dodds down at UCL is involved in both hubs, and he does a lot of work with policy. Next week, we're running in the very near future at least, we're running one of our regional roadshows down in London, and there's several people from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero are coming along, and they'll be able to hear about what HyRES is doing, and HyAct has the same kinds of collaboration. So it's going to be very important going forwards to ensure that we have that interaction to ensure the policy impact is making sure that we're getting the right information to the right people. And I think what's really good is that we already have those channels open and are in discussion about it.
That is a very important point, because that is a key for success to maximize the impact. I just want to add, because this area we are looking at hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels, so it's a very big area. There's a lot of technologies are being developed. A lot of them have huge potential, but currently the technology readiness level is still low. But currently the innovation pace is very fast. So in that case, we do need to provide more evidence to industry, to policymakers about different type of technologies. So in HyAct, we have one task to look at the technology roadmaps. We will look at different type of hydrogen production, transport, storage technologies, and we'll not only look at the past and what's happening. We not only look at the situational awareness, what's going on now, but also to look into the future, what may happen down the line. So we plan to publish roadmaps every year and have engagement workshops so that we can provide strong evidence to industry, to policymakers about the technology itself. We also have an overarching roadmap as one of the output, but we will do it every year, do it iteratively. So come back to Rachel's point, identify correct stakeholders is very important. We need to get correct people in the same room, and then we need to identify the procedure of the key decision making, to identify the bottleneck, and trying to find the solutions for that. So hopefully this can accelerate the development, the transition, and the detailed measures. For example, we will organize the joint events. We can publish joint papers. This is in our plan, and the joint communication as well, based on our research. We have this joint research together as well. Hopefully, through these mechanisms, we could maximize the impact on policy making.
Thank you. One question to ask is, are there any joint studies coming up between HyAct and HyRES?
So we've written into the two bids 2 initial case studies where we'll use the teams from both projects to work together. And the chosen case studies for the initial study are South Yorkshire and South Wales. And that's because we already have really good links with the industry and with the local authorities in those areas. And within those two, we'll be able to look at both the larger scale integration and also the technology that's needed to deploy there. So we've already started looking at, for example, in South Yorkshire, where might we produce hydrogen and where needs hydrogen on a large scale and how do they map up? And then we've started looking at, well, most of the large scale users would be industry, but what challenges do those industry have? And there's all sorts of things around the burners and the product temperature and all sorts of technical challenges. We have glass and steel and brick manufacturers within a small industrial cluster in South Yorkshire. So there are clear questions that both HyAct and HyRES need to answer separately and that we need to answer together. And then the other one is the South Wales cluster that Jianzhong's leading.
Yeah, and this collaboration will be very important for the UK because we are looking at this fundamental industry that's related to the national security as well. And we are looking at 2 types of industry clusters. What Rachael is looking at is this South Yorkshire cluster and the Black Country cluster as well. For example, 2 of them have a total emission around 500,000 tons CO2 every year. And so that's a very specific case. And we have a lot of such distributed, dispersed industry cluster in the UK. But for South Wales, we have been working on that in the past 10 years, probably more than 10 years now. Look at this South Wales industry cluster. That's a very big, very large industry cluster. So the key questions that people here to look at is a fuel switching to hydrogen, and also to look at the infrastructure support around that. This is something that current investment haven't been looked at, current research haven't been looked at, but it's critical because, for example, South Wales industry cluster is the second biggest industry and the power emitter of carbon in the UK. So every year is about 16 million tons of CO2 emitted in this region. And so we want to look at very carefully the design of this local infrastructure, the national infrastructure, how this could support the development of the hydrogen utilization in this region. Then we can combine with work with HyRES, then hopefully this can showcase the potential for the two centers to work together to solve genuine UK challenges. And also we are addressing this place-based agenda, and hopefully we can leverage significant existing funding and the industry support to do something really important for the country.
That last point you made, Jianzhong, that's hugely important, that kind of leveraging local support. And within the South Yorkshire area, we're working with the South Yorkshire Sustainability Centre and the Mayoral Combined Authority, and we're bringing in all of the links that they have. And you're absolutely right that to make a difference in this space, we need to be leveraging everything and pulling it all together. And I think that's exactly what these two case studies can do, that can really show how we can make a difference in this space.
I'd like to thank you both, Jianzhong Wu and Rachael Rothman, for your time today, and to the HyRES production team, Rhiannon and Dan, and to you, the audience, for accessing this podcast. Stay tuned for more soon.